Alright, what is up guys? So I finally got to visit the Memorial Hall of Chiang Kai-Shek in my recent visit to Taipei, Taiwan. And in this video I'm going to go through a quick recap with you guys of the legendary life of Chiang Kai-Shek. He is, after all, one of the most famous people throughout Chinese history. And he is the arch nemesis of the most revered person in the history of China, that is Mao Zedong, the founder of the People's Republic of China. So I'm going to roll the tape and show you guys what I've recorded in the Memorial Hall, and I'm going to talk a little bit of history here. So let's talk about this Memorial Hall itself as I was walking through. So the Memorial Hall, it's all white with 4 sides. So the roof is blue, as you can see, and it's octagon shape. And if you're wondering why it's an octagon shape, it's actually very simple, because octagon has 8 sides, and I've mentioned this many times. 8 is a very lucky number in China, so that's why they stick with it. And it's the same tradition in Taiwan. It's very lucky, so they decided to go for octagon shape. I actually counted the number of steps as I was walking up. There are 89 steps on both sides of the stairs. So this actually represents Jiang's age at the time of his death. Now his age and birth date has been widely disputed. I know there could be some variations, but I think that's the most acceptable number, which is the number 89. So that's what they went with. So this leads you up to the main entrance. So the ground level of the memorial house is there's a library and a museum documenting. So they document Chiang Kai-shek's entire life and his career, leading up to the Chinese Civil War, rising up to be the Generalissimo, and his final days in Taiwan. I definitely recommend checking it out. It's very cool. Only 2 stops away from the Taipei main station. It takes 5 minutes by subway. So let's talk about this guy, right? Everybody in China knows about these 2 legendary figures. You got Jiang and Mao. So let's talk about the Chinese Civil War. That is still going on to the present. In fact, at the present day, as I'm making this video, tensions between Taiwan and mainland China is at an all-time high. Chiang Kai-shek. I believe this is from the traditional Taiwanese language, which is called the Minnanhua. So they call him Chiang Kai-shek. But in Mandarin Chinese, he's mostly known as Jiang Jieshi. That's the most commonly known name. Or some people refer to him as Jiang Zhongzheng. These are all acceptable names, just different variations. And the most acceptable birthday I can find, like I said, his date actually varies, but he was the most acceptable date I can find is October 31st, 1887. So yes, this guy was actually born Halloween. It's quite interesting. And one more interesting fact, that Mao Zedong, he was actually born on Boxing Day. He was born December 26th. So another interesting fact there. He was born in the Zhejiang province. He has a very strong accent. I'm sure you can find tapes on YouTube of him actually talking. There are not many, but there's a few. But when he's trying to speak Mandarin Chinese, me as a Chinese person, I can barely understand him. So I want you guys to keep that in mind. His accent is very strong. And so Jiang, he was a member of the Kuomintang, or Kuomintang. That's what they know as in China, the KMT. So he was a lieutenant serving under Dr. Sun Yat-sen. I will cover his entire life story in an upcoming video. This guy is quite legendary. He is literally the god figure of both China and Taiwan. In the revolution to overthrow the Beiyang government and reunify China, with the help of the Soviets and the Chinese Communist Party, so Jiang, he organized the military for Sun's Canton nationalist government, and headed the Wenpo Military Academy. So as commander-in-chief of the National Revolutionary Army, where he became known as the Generalissimo. I'm not sure if that's the right term, but I guess that's how they translated it to English, because in Chinese maybe it sounds a little bit different. So he led the Northern Expedition from 1926 to 1928. He defeated a coalition of warlords. So if you remember, after the Qing Dynasty falls, China fell into a warlord era where all these local warlords, they were individual provinces and territories. It was a time of chaos. So he defeated this coalition of warlords, and he managed to basically kind of unify China under a new nationalist government. I say kind of because there's still a lot of conflicts going on. So midway through this northern expedition, the Kuomintang and CCP alliance, obviously, they broke down. That's why we have a Chinese Civil War. And Jiang Jieshi, he massacred the Chinese communists and any Kuomintang leftists inside the party. This will lead to this nearly 100-year-long Chinese civil war now, and I say it's almost 100 years because it is still going on to this day. But for Chiang Kai-Shek himself, he did eventually lose this battle in 1949, and he would flee to Taiwan to take refuge. Let's talk about the other side a little bit. So the Chinese Communist Party, yes, that's what they're always known for. That's what they're still known for in today's world. China is still known as a communist country, even though they're not 100% communist. A lot of things have changed. There's a lot of capitalism going on, but that's for a different video. So the Chinese Communist Party, they gained strength, especially after Dr. Sun Yat-sen's death in 1925. So there's extremely tensions that developed on both sides. We have more conservative elements among the Chinese nationalists. So Jiang, who is in the Whampoa army behind him, so he was the strongest candidate chosen to be Dr. Sun Yat-sen's hire to be the next leader of China. But he did have a lot of threats from opposing sides. So by alternate shows of force and leniency, so Jiang, he attempted to stamp the communists' growing influence without losing any support from the Soviets. So Moscow actually supported Jiang until the year of 1927. And that's the official start of the Chinese Civil War, which is in the year of 1927, 2 years after Dr. Sun Yat-sen's death. A coup took place on his own, and he finally broke with communists, expelling them from the Chinese Nationalist Party and suppressing the labor unions they had organized. And it's a little interesting fact here. So Mr. Jiang, he was actually a Christian. So in October of 1930, this is after the Chinese Civil War has started, he decided to come out as Christian. And this is because of the powerful, westernization of his wife's family, his second wife, that is So Mei-ling. And she actually studied overseas in the USA. She's very fluent in English, and she's very whitewashed, whatever you want to call it. So she became a Christian, and so Jiang thought it was the right thing for him to come out as a Christian as well. So, as the head of the new nationalist government, Jiang was committed to a program of social reform. But honestly, it's all bullshit. This social reform is on paper because he still controlled the country through what is mostly a dictatorship. Now, something very important I have to cover. I will cover the entire story in a separate video. So, the most legendary feat, I believe, achieved by Mao Zedong and the CCP, or the Balujun, that's what they were known as at the time. Actually, Mao Zedong and his Red Army was nearly wiped out before the official start of the Second Sino-Japanese War in 1937. So while they were stationed in Jiangxi, there was 5 attempts aimed at completely destroying Mao's army and wipe them off the face of the planet. And so under Mao Zedong's leadership, miraculously, they held off the first 4 encirclement attacks. I don't even know how they managed, but you gotta give it to Mao Zedong. This guy, he's a guerrilla warfare. They call it, the literal translations, exercise fighting. And this guy's unbelievable at it. Nobody in the world, in fact, maybe nobody in history is better at him. But for some reason, after holding off the first 4 attacks from the Kuomintang, and the Chinese Communist Party decided to switch leadership, and Mao was no longer in charge. And then came the 5th encirclement. This is when Jiang, he ordered 700,000 troops aimed at total annihilation, and he nearly succeeded. And the Red Army basically decided that our only hope of survival is to escape to a different part of the country, and this became the legendary Long March. So this covered roughly 10,000 kilometers, and there are a lot of variations to the distance because people aren't sure what the routes they took exactly to this day, but this is absolutely brutal. So in the course of just over 1 year, roughly 384 days, and the Red Army covered over 10,000 kilometers. They traversed through the most impossible, the most brutal, the most gut-wrenching terrains, included crossing at least 24 rivers through the frozen wastelands and 18 mountain ranges. So when the Long March started, there was roughly 100,000 people in total that was still part of the Red Army, so only 8,000 would survive in the end. But this gave Mao Zedong and the Balujun the isolation they needed from the Kuomintang. And Mao Zedong will actually lose 2 sons, and he will also lose his brother during the brutal march and during the encirclement battles beforehand. This heroic act, however, win the hearts of the nation. This is when Mao Zedong became a god in China, and this was a turning point in the Chinese Civil War, because up to this point, the vast majority of the country supported, Chiang Kai-Shek. He was their god figure, but a lot of people had different views. And after the successful Long March, fast forward in December of 1936, Jiang he was actually seized by one of his generals who believed that Chinese forces they should concentrate on fighting the Japanese and form a united front instead of so obsessed with stamping out the Chinese Communist Party. I think that's where Jiang Jieshi he made his #1 fatal error. A united front should have been formed much earlier. Had that happened, a few years earlier, China would not have been destroyed so bad by Japan, where upwards of 20 million civilians were killed. So Jiang he was held captive for actually 2 weeks. This is known as the Xi'an incident. This will shortly end after he finally agreed to form an alliance with Mao Zedong and with Balojun, the Chinese Communist Party, against the Japanese invaders. And soon we'll have the official start to the Second Sino-Japanese War. Absolutely brutal. It is the second deadliest front in World War II, behind the Eastern European front. Then the general story of what happened. I'm not gonna make this video extremely long. The fighting between the Chinese and Japanese was absolutely brutal. China would lose most of its territory, but eventually, after a brutal 8 years of fighting with the United Front, and China doing the best they can to hold off the Japanese, acts including the River River floods, where farmers deliberately flooded their own crops and millions of people were starved to death as a result of this, all aimed at stopping the Japanese advance. And this was successful in the end. China would finally achieve a victory in 1945 with the help of the Soviets and the Americans. In the northern Manchuria province, you got the Operation August Storm, where the Soviets would help the Chinese take back Manchuria, and obviously what happened in Japan. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were both nuked, leading to Japan's surrender on September 2nd of 1945. But the battle does not end, right? The United Front breaks up in 1945. But at this point, Jiang Jieshi's defeat was inevitable. Like I said, most of the country had turned against him because his refusal to form a united alliance with Mao Zedong to focus on the Japanese invaders. He would suffer total defeat in 1949, and he would escape to the island of Taiwan, where he would spend his remainder days. I will cover his final 26 years on the island of Taiwan in a separate video. Even though China was officially united on October 1st, 1949, fighting on mainland China between the Chinese Communist Party and the Kuomintang actually lasted until roughly 1959. That's how brutal the Civil War was. And like I said, to present day, right, nearly 100 years after the official start of the Chinese Civil War, this war is still reaching out to this day. It's the same thing between North and South Korea, and I don't know what's going to happen between mainland China and Taiwan in the upcoming years, but I have an opinion, and I will give my opinion on who I support in a future video. And if you're wondering what is the root cause of the Chinese Civil War, and we need to go back to almost 160 years. It is the death of this man, as I mentioned earlier in the video, Dr. Sun Yat-sen, back in 1925. That's what started this all, and I will cover this in the upcoming video very soon. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.